I don't get on Reddit very often, maybe just a few times a year. But I was on there a couple of days ago, just kind of snooping around, and I ran into this one about a young woman who posted a Reddit question in r/askmen, asking whether men really feel that there is a loneliness epidemic and what's driving it, and how can women help. It's up here on the screen, but what we're going to focus on today is her questions. She's curious again how much of the male loneliness reflects real life. Do men feel that it's perpetuated by standards set by other men, which I'm going to circle back to before we're done here? What do men think is driving it, and what can women do? Now, she did post it in a subreddit in which responses are only possible or from men, right? It's one of those that limits responses. So I went through the first order responses, right? Not the responses to original comments, not the replies to arguments that were included with them. And I wanted to see what men themselves said that the actual problem is. So the purposes of analyzing the thread, as we're going to do today, it's perfectly reasonable to expect that the 19 first order answers were from men. As I mentioned, the post is flared for answers from men only, and the subreddit's visible rule says that only men can provide top-level answers. So let's have a look in just a moment about what that means and what men have said. Collectively, I'll say this: the comments do not frame a male loneliness in any way as a simple men need girlfriends or men refuse to socialize. The dominant takeaway is that men feel socially disconnected for several overlapping reasons. I'm going to cover them in 7 different topics that I've identified in those men's responses to the woman's question on Reddit. And real quick, for those of you who were here to watch the AI therapy video that I did maybe about a week ago, this is the one in which I asked viewers to put in a prompt into an LLM, ChatGPT, Grok, Copilot, whichever of their choice, and see what response it gave regarding a scenario in a relationship conflict. I did say that I was going to make a follow-up video on that. I actually decided to put those results over on Substack. And one of the reasons is anytime I talk about AI on this channel, those topics do not perform real well. I did promise that I would do it. I'm going to put a link down below so you can get those results. And I've been putting up here a couple of images for you to have a little bit of an idea. So that's over there. Thank you for being patient with that. All right, so let's talk about those 7 major themes that I identified from men's 19 comments to the woman's question on Reddit. The first is along the lines of men wanting their experiences to be believed, not corrected or minimized. And by the way, I've been saying this in my content, in my videos, for quite some time. Some of you have already seen it. And one of my contentions has always been that research and surveys and data reported by Pew Research and Randstad, anyone else like that, they can't measure and define and associate loneliness properly. They're going about it the wrong way. And one of the reasons, like Reddit or not, one of the reasons that this makes for such a good analysis is this is men being honest to a woman's prompt and her response. So at least kudos for the woman for asking these questions. And they're not filtered through some type of study knowing that they're going to be analyzed. So this is, I think, a great source of information. Again, think what you will about Reddit. In this instance, I think it's very helpful. So the most prominent theme is not a request for women to rescue lonely men. It's a demand for basic recognition. Men's accounts describing dating disadvantages, body-based mockery, emotional pain, and them being told that the problem is imaginary, self-inflicted, or solved by generic reassurance. And the sad part is that's exactly what women say they want from men, to open up. The comment with the most engagement in the thread is about empathy, specifically around men experiencing things like height discrimination, and that is an invalid worry for them. The second thing that I noticed was dating and desirability are a major part of this discussion. Several men connected loneliness to feeling undesirable, interchangeable, or shut out of dating, and aspects such again as physical appearance, dating app dynamics, selective preferences, ghosting, and the perception that approaching women is socially risky when dating is involved. But even those comments are really more about something a little bit more broad, I think. It's feeling that one's presence is not welcome, accepted, and that rejection is arbitrary or that men are simply not good enough. The third theme that I noticed was structural issues. For example, the disappearance of community. The strongest non-dating explanation is the loss of social opportunities and ordinary repeated contact. Men do mention work, the internet, streaming, gaming, delivery services, and the inclusion of casual in-person routines with solitary convenience. Now, these men's arguments is that people no longer need each other for ordinary day-to-day living, for entertainment, errands, doing favors for people, or just overall social activity. All of those which remove even those minor interactions from which friendships used to develop or maintain. The fourth thing that these guys mentioned was male friendships are increasingly difficult to build and maintain. Now, a number of comments explicitly state that loneliness is about insufficient depth in male friendship, not just a lack of romantic attention. The original poster's own experience that her boyfriend's male friends helped him in a way that she couldn't is broadly consistent here. By the way, if I didn't already mention it, I will put the link down below. Go through this thread on Reddit, have a read for you, if you like. I think it's really interesting. Now, some guys commented that adult work life, marriage, financial strain, also things like living arrangements, and the loss of shared spaces, all of those things make friendship maintenance harder. And some do, in fact, say that men themselves need to initiate more. They need to be accepting more invitations and stop withdrawing into those solitary routines. For the fifth one, there is a split between society is doing this to men and men are partly doing it to themselves. Some guys do put the emphasis on cultural hostility towards men. That would be things like men being called creepy and weak, that they're emotionally fragile, they're dangerous and fundamentally bad. Others mention that men are declining invitations, as I said, that they're losing social skills, they're isolating through gaming and social media, and that they're becoming cynic or treating socializing as something that requires a practical purpose, right? I'm not going to do it unless I really have a reason to. Number 6 that I found was emotional expression being presented as a double bind. Now, listen, several men argue that they were criticized whether they show emotion or don't. And this is, again, something I've spoken on several times. Affection becomes love bombing to some women. Being reserved is described as avoidance. Men's hurt feelings, apparently, are somehow fragile male ego. And crying makes him a, and I'm quoting here, man baby. And the point that they are making is not merely that men feel they need permission to cry. It's that many men do not trust that openness and that it will be received well by women in particular. And the seventh thing that I noticed, the requested role for women is mostly indirect. Guys' comments don't primarily ask women to provide emotional labor, to date men that they don't want to be with, obviously, or to become men's social coordinators. They're not looking for help by women in any of those ways. So the overall requests, if that's what you want to call it, sound more like this. Don't dismiss or mock our stated experiences. Don't treat our emotional honesty as weakness, pathology, or manipulation. Please support our maintenance of friendships with other guys. Don't punish us for investing time in our male friendships. And this one I really did like a lot. Please let fathers have meaningful time with their sons and help boys develop emotional and friendship skills early. I really like that one a lot. Now, as I've been saying on this channel for months, loneliness, so-called loneliness, as it's reported, is too vague and abstract for what a lot of men experience. And it almost never includes causes of it. From men's own statements here, they're not necessarily saying that I wish I had more people in my life or around me. What they're saying is, I don't feel like I'm wanted. When I try to explain why, I'm told that I'm imagining it. When I try to be open, I get derided, pathologized, or punished. When I try to improve the situation, the advice is either empty reassurance or blame. And that's what we don't get in the research, but it is what we get in real life. Again, I know that you guys have had similar experiences. You've said it before in the comments, but I want to hear it again. How close, how true is this to some of your experiences? Because that's a different problem from the general narrative that we always hear. It's a repeated experience of rejection, invalidation, and social discouragement that eventually produces the withdrawal. And I think learned helplessness applies very well here. Let me break that down very succinctly. Men are repeatedly treated as undesirable, disposable, suspicious, and emotionally defective. So, as such, they then learn that openness, initiation, and asking for connection brings ridicule and rejection. So, naturally, they pull back, they spend more time online, more time by themselves, they stop reaching out, and they stop practicing those social skills. They decline invitations and become passive. Then, the next step is that everyone else sees the withdraw and says, see? Men are doing this to themselves. So from the Reddit thread, we get these precise pieces. Men describing how they're treated, expressing why they withdraw, and then defending themselves against their reasons for that withdrawal. And that assessment of men's real-life experiences is a lot more than we get from a lot of survey data and research papers that are written by, let's just call it what it is, 80% of women in social sciences. I think it's extremely useful because it avoids the indolent and tiresome excuses for how they all try to discuss our experiences without actually asking us. The very clear reality from this example is that agency is hardest for guys to exercise when they've been conditioned for years to expect humiliation or futility from trying. Again, I've also been mentioning this for a very long time. Male loneliness is not primarily about men being alone. It's about men hearing that they're not wanted or they're not believed. It's not safe to be honest and eventually responding like a normal person who has learned that connection is not worth trying for. So what women in society call male loneliness is often male alienation. But they'll never admit that because that requires empathy and accountability. Now I want to circle back real quick to that original post on Reddit from that young woman. And one thing that I find of particular interest. Let me just say that I wholeheartedly believe this. I'm going to preface this with, I don't blame her. I don't think less of her or poorly. But I did find it very interesting. One of the questions that she asked is if men feel that men's loneliness and that so-called epidemic is perpetuated by standards set by other men, without having asked the same question, and if any of this is perpetuated by women. Now, I think it's more telling of our times than this individual girl. So if you do go over there, woman, whatever, if you do go over there and watch it, please do not leave any negative comments. It's just not something that society is doing, asking if any of this loneliness business has to do with women. Again, I just think it's more interesting that she did not ask. She just didn't have the wherewithal to do it because maybe, for example, she's just not aware that it's possible women could be part of the problem. But if you are tired of being pathologized by women and society, but struggle with how to respond, check out my Rules of Engagement book, chapter, and field guide. The chapter helps you recognize and understand it, and the guide gives you the steps and the framework to apply it for a more confident life. Cheers, guys, as always, and I'll see you soon.